Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us here today. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session on harnessing big data for precision health, unleashing new opportunities. It's a topic that is central to the future of healthcare in Qatar and globally. Allow me to start first by introducing briefly our panelists for this session. We have Dr. Saeed Ismail, who's the acting president and chief scientific and operation officer for Qatar Precision Health Institute. We also have with us here Dr. Juliette Ibrahim, the director of e-health in the Ministry of Public Health, Qatar, and Dr. Khaled Fakhro, who's the chief research officer of Sidra Medicine, and Dr. Paiva Selanau K. Special Envoy of Health and Well-being at the Ministry of Social Health in Finland. And finally, we also have with us Dr. Benjamin Hopkins, who's the director of the Organoid platform at the Englander Institute for Precision Medicine, and Dr. Devian Smith, who's the CEO of Arbor Biotechnologies. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. Today, we're going to talk about big data and the implications and how to harness big data for improving healthcare. Let me take just a couple minutes to provide the context of this session. Precision health is powered today by a vast and continuously expanding range of data sources, including omics, lifestyle factors, environmental exposure, electronic health records, insurance claims, wearable data, and even social determinant of health. There is a broad consensus that integrating these diverse data sources can revolutionize healthcare by offering new insight into the complex nature of diseases, improving diagnostics accuracy, and informing the design of the next generation therapies and clinical trials, and to tailor treatment to individual needs. Each data source offers unique insights, but integrating and analyzing this data requires advanced infrastructure, supportive policies, and collaborations across stakeholders ranging from citizens, healthcare providers, to private hospitals, clinics, doctors, pharmacies, and policymakers. It also requires partnerships with investment from biotech and pharmaceutical companies. These partnerships present unique opportunities to advance precision health at scale, but also challenges that we will discuss with a focus on how to overcome barriers to data sharing and establish partnership for utilizing data in ways that protect citizens' rights and privacy while maintaining public trust. Through our conversation today, we will seek to uncover what's needed in terms of policies, regulations, infrastructure, and technological advances to transform data into actionable insight, to discover the root causes of diseases, develop personalized therapies, and create a proactive, data-driven healthcare system that benefits everyone. We will begin today's session by examining experiences and lessons learned from two countries at different stages of developing national integrated health data across healthcare setting, namely Finland and Qatar, each with unique approaches to data sharing, infrastructure, and industry engagement. We will also discuss the importance of challenges of integrating health data with data on social determinant of health to create a more holistic view of health outcomes. We will try to close by exploring what's the real impact of big data is having today, and what are the realistic expectations for big data in the near term, which areas are showing true progress, and where do we need to temper our expectations? And most importantly, what are the tangible promises of big data that can meaningfully improve patient care and outcomes today? I encourage everyone to be engaged, ask questions, and share your insight. Thank you for being part of this important conversation, and let's begin. Just a few instructions. We want this session to be as interactive and conversational as possible, and thus I would like to allow for sufficient time for the audience to ask questions, and therefore I'd like to encourage and remind the panelists to provide short and concise answers, but also I would like to give you the opportunity to feel free to follow up on any of the comments provided by any of the panelists. Let's start by talking about data infrastructure and data integration. Finland is regarded as a pioneer in the use of data health in the EU, and its success is inspiring the development of the European health data space. As you have taken a pioneering approach to integrating health data, creating a unified system that prioritizes privacy, interoperability, and innovation, Pavia, could you provide an overview of this journey? How did it start? Specifically, what were the key factors in enabling infrastructure and policies that made this achievement possible and help you secure the public trust and engagement?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here to share our experiences, but also to learn from you and the other panelists also. So I would first like to begin with that health sector is the last sector going through the digital transformation. And there is a huge opportunity and huge benefits we could get then using the data that is already there, using the technology that is already there. But what we need is what our moderator just said here. We need then trust for our people that this data, which is really sensitive, that data is used then in a secure way, then respecting the privacy of people. And we have gone quite far this journey in Finland, and I would say that it began then already 1960. During the 1960s, when our politicians launched then the welfare society, which was then based on taxation. So then there was a great need for data. There was a need to be able to connect the data that we were gathering, to be able to then deliver the services, education, health services, and other services to people, then to pay back then the taxation money for those. So then since then we have had identification number, which is linked to all the data, different registers we have. There are legislations behind then all the registers we have, and authorities take care of them, and people have used to get benefit in their everyday life of that data in other sectors than health sector. And they were then also asking then the same kind of opportunities also from health sector. Of course, you need then infrastructure. We have also digital infrastructure available in our country. There is know-how, knowledge that is really important that social and health professionals have then that knowledge to use those, but also then patients and people there. And this longitudinal data now, during then the data economy era, is really a big treasure. So we have longitudinal registers, but we have been able to connect then the data, and we have had digitized patient records, primary sector and specialized healthcare also for decades, and we have a national archive through which then the data follows patients. So there is infrastructure, knowledge, know-how, and possibility to combine the data. So we have legislation then which is really important to build the trust, but to make it possible then also to combine the data. We have a legislation for primary use, and according to that, we then established the national archive through which then the data follows patients. So we have modular system, which I heard that is also the thing here, that there are different electronic medical records where the data comes then. And We have also secondary use of the data legislation, which makes it possible then to use the data in different registers, from health registers, but also the socioeconomic registers, to then do research and develop different tools then according and based on that data. We have had that legislation since 2019, and having a pioneer role, we have, of course, learned by doing, but there have been all the time political support then to fill the gaps we have seen and make it more smoother than the access to data, but at the same time we have also shown the benefits where there are a lot of examples on that, but we can discuss them perhaps later on. But
I think to make it very clear to the audience that because of the secondary health law, the health data are accessible to both public and private institutions.
Yes, they
including insurance companies.
Yeah, and not only inside Finland. I mean, all the research groups from all over the world and all the private companies are able to have access to our data. They have to show, they have to then apply then the license to get the access from our authority, FinData authority, and if they can show that their study will then benefit population health, it is okay. You can get then the access to that. Yeah. But we have also then make secure environments where you can handle that. Our authority combines then, according to the legislation, then the data from the different registers, and it really makes difference when you have this data. But it also, at the same time, improves the quality from health professionals, how they put the data into registers also.
Yeah. So, for example, I think when I visited in Finland, although there are 11 different biobanks, when you request your data, you request it from FinData, and FinData then reach out to all, so you only deal with one interface. I'd like to move just into one thing that is unique. I mean, we say that big data's great promise is insight, but its greatest flaw may be the illusion of understanding without the context. And the fact that 60% of health determinants are not captured by medical records. And in Finland, you have this component of combining medical data with health, social determinant of health. Can you just tell us briefly, where are you in that journey? I know it's not as advanced as the exact medical data, and are this data now integrated, and are you beginning to apply the combination of this data to look at wellness and disease?
Yeah. We went through a major social and health service reform some years ago. So we have totally integrated primary and secondary care, but also rescue services under the same authority. And then the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, they are all allocating then the financing to those regions. So there is incentive then to make then pathways, patient pathways, but also find out then the risk factors and try to use the data in that way. So incentives are really important. But then the social services, we are now getting them at the same level that we have in the health data also. And it's really important because we are aging really fast, our population, but if we think then there are many patient groups and many cohorts where it's really important that you also have social services data there. But I would like to say that when we are talking about, for example, non-communicable diseases, it's really important that you also use data beyond social and health services to be able to tackle then the behavioral aspects also.
Thank you. I just would like to take this opportunity to remind the audience that you can, if you have questions, we will come back to the audience. You can feel free to send them via the Wish app. I'd like to go to Dr. Juliette. You've been leading the development of a national system and integration platform for connecting information across health sector in Qatar, including the establishment of a national health information exchange and central data repository. The e-health hub is scheduled to be launched in the beginning of next year. Could you walk us through a bit the journey, the rationale for doing this, and the approach you're taking now for data collection, and what's the vision for this hub?
Absolutely. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. I couldn't figure out how to get going, but I'm okay now. First of all, thank you so much. I thank you to Wish for the organization. It's really a pleasure to be here talking to all of you about what we're doing here in Qatar. In Qatar, we have a great foundation. Our government health sector is very strong when it comes to digitization. We have a unified electronic medical record already between our primary healthcare corporation and our secondary, tertiary government corporations. So that's a wonderful foundation that we have here. The government sector plays a majority part in terms of providing services for the country. However, we do have an important and growing private sector that until date has been a bit fragmented and not connected digitally with the government sector. So, and we know that patients may obtain services in the government sector, and then they may also obtain services in the private sector. So one of our main issues is that those two were not connected, and that when patients sort of went in between the borders of different facilities, their information stopped at the door and didn't follow with them. So our vision really is to create a digitized ecosystem where data flows seamlessly between all of the healthcare providers across the country. And that data flows with the patient, no matter where they receive care. This journey has started several years ago in terms of developing our vision and determining what we want to do, how we want to build it, the standards, etc. But the platform is built, it's been developed. It's based on sort of vendor agnostic standards. So we have in Qatar many different electronic medical records providers, and we also have some providers, actually healthcare providers, that are still paper-based. So it's really creating this seamless journey for both the healthcare professional as well as the patient, so that a healthcare professional can see the care that's been obtained anywhere across the country, and the patient can as well. The patient is empowered because they now have access to that data in a comprehensive way, regardless of what provider provided that care. This will go a long way in terms of improving healthcare outcomes in Qatar, improving public health measures in Qatar, from an improved health outcomes perspective, for example, being able to see this comprehensive patient record through the National Health Information Exchange is something that in and of itself will enhance the quality of care provided, enhance the patient safety, because you have the full information, you have all the medication information, all the diagnostic information. From a patient perspective, it improves the experience. The patient no longer has to duplicate tests, duplicate treatments, because the one provider can't see what was done elsewhere. From a public health perspective, we have now a central data repository of healthcare data across the entire country. Huge, opportunities here to now utilize that data for improved public health measures, for targeted public health campaigns, for improved surveillance measures and protection measures across the country. Huge, robust analytics capabilities. Now you have an entire database that you can use for predictive analytics, for precision medicine, preventive care, etc. So really, what we're working on now is the foundations, creating this central data repository. I think what's maybe different in Qatar, first of all, we're one of few countries that have done this at a national level, but also we're doing it in a really comprehensive way. So we're creating a central data repository, we're recreating this National Health Information Exchange that allows the professionals to see the data. We're creating the personal health app, a mobile app that allows patients to be integrated into this as well. But we're also providing a couple other things that I just want to mention briefly as well, if that's okay. E-prescriptions. So we know that a critical component of treatment and care is medications. We are digitizing all e-prescriptions in the country. This also is underpinned by a national clinical decision support system for drug alerts, allergy alerts, et cetera, at a national level, which is a huge patient safety component. We also will be having a national disease registry solution. So now all patients with certain priority conditions will be in a registry, but not just a registry meaning a list of patients. No, this is now connected to care plans that are standardized and national, based on our national clinical guidelines, so that we can start to make sure that patients have a standardized approach to care regardless of where they receive care. In addition to that, we know that some of our providers are non-digitized, so they're still on paper, and they're smaller, maybe they don't have the infrastructure or the capacity. So we have developed an EMR as well that's available to those, so that there's now no excuse not to be digitized. I think where we are, like I said, it's been a journey. We hope by this year we'll have a couple providers actually connected, because right now this is just a big empty box. But once providers start connecting and start sharing that information, that's when the huge benefits will be shown. And so hopefully by this year we'll have
I think maybe for many people in our community, I think this is the first time they hear about it. I think this is perhaps one of the most exciting developments for health, and it will be a very strong foundation for research. The other feature is, I think there are many functionalities that will be built on this. I mean, we talked about access of pharmacy data, and with that comes, being able to recognize potential of drug-drug interactions immediately. And I think the idea of individuals having an app where they have all their health record data, and I know it's the case for Qatar and Finland, that you can always turn off what you don't want people to see.
Right. We have, in the app itself, there's the consent settings where the patients can determine that exactly.
Just to close on this overview of the different experiences is, what are you considering from the perspective of the regulatory framework in terms, because in Finland, the legislation on secondary use of health data was really transformative for an enabler for research. So in Qatar, are we ready thinking about this, or?
Definitely. I think, we're definitely focusing primarily and first and foremost on primary use, right, for treatment of the patient, for the benefit of the patient. However, absolutely, we are thinking about secondary use as well. This must be considered in terms of the research capabilities, all of the other innovation capabilities that the data will bring. So we currently have a strict consent policy that says the patient has to consent to have their data shared. And for any secondary use that's not anonymized, they have to have explicit consent for that as well. Okay. However, if it is anonymized, obviously we have that included within the regulatory framework for secondary use.
Thank you.
But we want to learn from countries that have already done it to make sure that our regulations are strict and best practice.
Yeah, and we don't need any more consent when we use the secondary use of the data, because there is the authority who combines and anonymizes and pseudonymize then the data before it gives it to the researcher and private sector project purposes. But it's really a game changer. It's not only like innovation purposes, but it's also knowledge based for research, but also for steering of the whole health system. That is also one purpose where we can use then, and for population health purposes.
Dr. Saeed, could you give us a quick overview on what type of samples and data that you're collecting at the Qatar Precision Health Institute? Also, QPHI is in early stages of clinical implementation. How are you approaching the integration of diverse data types, such as genomic, electronic health record? And I know that we have a number of initiatives on wellness, so lifestyle data as well.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder that Qatar started, I call it the first wave of national genome projects and biobanking initiatives. Biobank was almost operational. It started to get its first participants in 2012. Genome sequenced its first genome in 2015. if you think of Genomics England launching in 2014, Australian Genomics Australia in 2015, and PMI, the Precision Health Initiative by President Obama then, or now called the All of Us, was in 2015. So Qatar was among the first countries to realize the importance of launching such large-scale genome projects that will enable any country to be a pioneer, as we say in our vision, in the implementation of precision health. So you have to have the data. And now fast forward 10 years or more, we have 45,000+ whole genomes from the Qatar Biobank, which is one of the most established biobanks in the region. Each participant spends 3 hours. The depth of phenotypic data collected there is unique, all the way, as we always say, from 66 blood markers to whole body MRI. And we've also done for a subset of the participants multi-omics analysis. So we have 3, and now we're going to 6,000 participants out of the 45+ participants who have whole genome sequencing. We're going for the transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and the other omics. So, and we're also linking those to their EMR records. As we speak now, almost 50% of them, 20,000 participants from the biobank, are linked to their, we have established links to their EMR records, and we hope soon in the coming few months that all of them we will establish this link. So as we always say, and it's not only Qataris, it's mainly Qataris, 70-80% Qataris, but the rest is long-term residents who happen to be from the greater Middle East. So we, in a nutshell, we have one of the most standardized data, health-related data collections related to this part of the world.
Thank you. I would like to move to the second part of the panel discussion today, and that is, how we utilize data to drive discovery and guide the development of new therapies. So with the rise of big data and multi-omics, spanning genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and beyond, we're gaining unprecedented insight into biological complexity underlying diseases. These advances offer the possibility to create disease models that are far more accurate and representative of real human conditions, moving us closer to personalized therapies that address the unique needs of each patient. I'd like to start with Dr. Smith, and the question is, how are companies, especially early-stage companies like Arbor Biotechnologies, leveraging multi-omics data to drive discovery and development of next-generation genetic medicine?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. So Arbor Biotech, we're a US-based biotech company that utilizes CRISPR-based gene editing. So effectively using molecular scissors to go in and alter the genome to fix underlying genetic diseases. With that technology, it means we need to have a really good knowledge of the underlying genetic pathologies that exist in a disease. And so being able to utilize some of the existing databases and emerging databases is vital for us, because it's important as we dive in to a particular disease to understand what are the mutations that occur across the population. Are there particular SNPs that we need to keep in mind as well as we design a particular therapeutic that can be useful for the highest number of patients with a particular genetic disease. And so we utilize a lot of that data to help us create new therapies. Now that's the first step. The other place where I think it's becoming valuable, and you mentioned on the disease modeling side, is one of the biggest challenges in drug development is that the animal models are mostly useless in many cases. They're not translatable into what you may see in the human. I would say that's changing with these new targeted therapies like CRISPR-based gene editing, some of the gene therapies out there, where you're actually, when you fundamentally alter the underlying DNA, you can be much more predictive of the biological outcome. And I think we've seen that play out in clinical studies to date, where the data that's generated in animals is actually directly translatable into humans which is fantastic because it cuts the time and cost to develop a new therapy down, which is really important. So those are some of the ways we leverage the new data. The other way is identifying new targets. I think over the last 5 to 10 years, as more and more genetic data comes out, we're able to identify targets for diseases that we previously did not know the underlying genetics for. You know, particularly in the CNS, we're understanding more about the underlying genetic drivers of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ALS, for example, which allows companies to then begin to develop therapeutics targeting to those targets. So I think it is, it's early days. We're making some significant headway in utilizing this new data to create new therapies.
Yeah. I mean, we generally hear quite a lot about the word multi-omics, but it's usually very difficult to find specific examples where it's either directly in informing clinical decisions, or I don't know if you have examples in the drug discovery field where they've really driven the identification of new targets or medicine, or are we still at an early stage?
Yeah, so I can speak to it a little bit on the genomic side. One of the disease areas we're very interested in is ALS, which is a devastating neuromuscular disease. And over the last decade, as we've been able to aggregate across all of the genetic data and all the various omics data, it's become clear that there's a couple of driving underlying genetic drivers of disease for what's historically been called the sporadic ALS patients, where, you know, if we don't understand what causes it, we just call it sporadic. The reality is there is some underlying cause, we just don't know what it is. And I think over the last decade, we've really begun to understand that there's some molecular determinants that are driving the disease, and a lot of that is based on not only the underlying genomics, but also some of the other transcriptomics and proteomics, which has led to identification of proteins that are transcripts that are misspliced, which then translate into truncated proteins, which then drive the phenotype. And so that utilization of the pan-omic data, if you will, has been a really important underlying help in identifying new targets.
Thank you. And Dr. Khalid, you want to follow up quickly?
Yes, shortly, that we have to remember here also that in different populations there are different subtypes of these diseases, and that's why we really need population data from different populations, and mostly the data we have used in clinical trials and to understand diseases comes from Europe and Western Europe. So it's really important that we have data, and that is one thing where I think politicians but also people have to understand that without having the data, giving the consent to use that data, we can't actually develop precision medicine.
Yeah. And maybe I'll go to Dr. Khalid. I mean, in the case of rare genetic diseases, which I know it's an area that you're very passionate about, you've been leading, and it's a major focus for Sidra Medicine. One would think that the concept of data integration and multi-omics in rare genetic would be the ideal case study for this. So given the complexity and diversity of rare diseases, how do you approach that using multi-omics? And how do you approach data collection in a way that enable meaningful insight to support your program?
It's working, right? Yeah. Thanks for that question. I think that it's really interesting because the comment you made probably is a really good transition from where we were to rare disease, because you talk about population differentiation. When you think about rare disease, every individual is a population. It really is that individualized, and that's the kind of conceptual shift you need to make when we're talking about population scale medicine. Efforts to do genome programs and so forth at big scale. You're usually doing a superficial scan of a large number of people, and both superficially, both from the molecular biology point of view, for example, understanding their genetic is a layer, but also from the clinical point of view, like you say, diabetes, non-diabetes, obese, and you're doing that at a very sort of high level. When you look at rare disease, you really need to peel back so many layers of complexity to understand exactly what's happening in a patient. And to give the audience just a bit of background, so rare diseases are individually rare. There's about 7,000 to 8,000 different rare diseases, but they collectively affect about 6% of our kids. And that's a huge number, because 50% of those affected face mortality or severe morbidity in the first 5 years of life. And so it's a big, big, big problem for families facing rare disease, for health systems facing rare disease. And we tend to think of rare disease, the challenge there being the treatment. But really, one of the biggest challenges is just diagnosis. Kids go around the world looking for an answer. I mean, parents go around the world asking, what is wrong with my child, and how do I understand? If you can't give it a label, how do you begin treating it? So this is where I think the advances in genomics and now multi-omics has really come in to revolutionize the field of rare disease. We now have examples of what's called the diagnostic odyssey, which is just from first hospital visit to getting a label. That used to be about 5 to 7 years by most health economic studies. I think now it's cut down to, I think the World Guinness Book of Records is under 24 hours, which is remarkable. I'd say that's an extreme, and in most cases, it can come down to a couple of weeks to at least understand what's wrong from a genetic point of view. And because of that enabling technology, the ability to bring genomics into the rare disease clinic, that has actually given rise to what I call today this plethora of advanced therapies, basically biotech, right? So all these companies have really sprouted because we finally understand where to look. So where to look tells you how to start dissecting mechanism, and the mechanism tells you how to start thinking about therapies. So to come to your question about multi-omics, I think, again, when we think about multi-omics in rare disease, the reason we want multi-omics is very simple, theoretically speaking, is we really want to understand on a molecular level what's happening inside the patient, right? On a practical level, it is incredibly difficult. And it's because the multi-omics technologies themselves are still under development. There's still so much noise that you have to deal with when you separate signal from noise. And I think QPHI and QRDI were very brave in launching a Path Toward Precision Medicine grant that actually emphasized the importance of multi-omics in rare diseases. And we're going to see more of these kinds of bets that are made. But the idea is, and we've actually tried it in a small subset of patients, you would think that you do the genomics and you do the multi-omics and the Venn diagram would nicely overlap and it would show you where to look. But in fact, the Venn diagram is 2 different bubbles. And so this is reporting from the front line. And so the genomics helps you with the diagnosis. I'm not saying the multi-omics doesn't help. In fact, the multi-omics can help with the diagnosis, but it doesn't tell you what the genetic cause is yet. So you might be able to diagnose and treat based on multi-omics, but integrating that is difficult. And of course, the final piece, which I think is very important to mention, is the clinical description of rare disease. We think about, again, when we think about cohorts, it's structured data, it's easy to pull out, it's easy to process, it's easy to think about creating a hub, registries very quickly. For rare disease, a lot of it is notes and details and very specific things that make it a challenge to try to focus on. So it really is an exciting frontier, and I think it's going to be a frontier that we'll see a lot of investment in over the next decade.
Thank you. So let me turn to Dr.
And just one note, I think, to follow up on what Dr. Fakro said. If as we've looked at, one rare disease, let's say propionic acidemia, it's a rare disease worldwide, but as you dive into it, the mutations are different depending on where those founder mutations are. And so across different geographies, it's a different mutation, which then means from a drug development perspective, you may actually have to develop different drugs for each geography because of the underlying mutational differences. So getting that data, it changes the situation from it's not always a one-size-fits-all, even within a single rare disease for a therapeutic.
Thank you. And if Dr. Benjamin, your work focuses heavily on using multi-omic and functional modeling. Until now, many of the disease models that we use in preclinical studies are usually based on them tinkering around with 1 or 2 genes or a few genes at best. So my question is, to what extent are we now beginning to use multi-omic data to design the more sophisticated human and disease-relevant models in your work, perhaps in the cancer, I think, in one area, but would like to hear other examples as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question, and thank you for letting me be here and participating. This is a great panel to be on. Multi-omics comes into play, my work is in cancer modeling. So we take individual patients and make mini avatars of their tumors. So we'll take a single patient's tumor and make 100,000 copies of it. And that allows us to run high throughput drug screening and sequencing of every type you can think of. And so when you're developing patient level, EHR records, if you want to integrate those data, you're talking about multi-omics. What that means on any given day changes. The technology is different today than it was last week. And in 3 years, when the samples that you're designing your study around now are ready, you're going to be running a different sequencing panel or technology than you were before. And so I think it's really important to think about multi-omics as what is the best way to ask a question at a given time. And so you had asked for an example of where do we use multi-omics. And so there are a whole bunch of patients with breast cancer, ER-positive breast cancer, that have mutations in PIK3CA, which is a gene that regulates metabolism largely in cell growth. And when you give the drugs that target that mutation, that specific mutation to patients, they work for a bit, but they tend not to be curative. And then the tumors recur. And when you look at the genomics, the drug was designed, and the original trials are designed specifically on the mutations. It's an H1047R mutation in PIK3CA. And what's really fascinating about the data is that then if you look at the RNA sequencing, which does not seem to correlate, patients on that drug over time have the signaling in that pathway re-upregulated. And so you're seeing in the multi-omics this ability for us to very functionally target the enzyme that we want to target, but then your body responding to it. And in that case, what seems to happen is that your body increases the insulin it releases to compensate for the drug, and so that reactivates the pathway. And so from the multi-omics, there have now been trials run by Novartis and Bayer and some other companies with their PI3 kinase inhibitors, adding in dietary components or small molecule inhibitors of the glucose transporters so that they prevent that insulin spike. And so there are a lot of those examples where we run, ER-positive breast cancer with PI3 kinase mutations represents a huge number of patients worldwide. And we're able to take the multi-omics data and very quickly adapt from the multi-omics we see in the clinic into these new trials. And I think that more and more as we subdivide, in cancer care and in other care, you're going to see that the application of multi-omics, and the key for groups like this is going to be collaborating from the very beginning, working together to develop a system where we can incorporate all of these different data, whatever they are, so that when I have a patient that gets care with me and then walks across the street to Memorial Sloan Kettering, they still have access to our data and vice versa. And I think that that's one of the really impressive things about what you're describing.
Sure. Do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. This is a really great example of why we have to, at the government, regional and global level, have a continuous discussion about the regulation. Because the processes we have, for example, for clinical trials or for technology medical devices development, they don't actually give us then possibility to use the technology we now use, because it is changing all the time. For example, then if we think about then the AI, use of AI, it's the algorithms are learning at all time when you are there, and that is not the way how our regulation processes go. So we can't actually use then these technologies because of our regulation processes. So it's really, really important that we that politicians, but also then those who put the regulations and develop then that there is collaboration between private sector who actually and researchers who actually understand what the technology is and can do. And then those who decide on the regulations. Otherwise, they are going far and far from each other, and we are not getting the benefits that there already are.
Thank you. I'd like to pause a bit and take some of the questions that the audience have presented, but I would appreciate if you could answer quickly. So, is one question to Dr. Juliet. Does the upcoming e-health hub includes mental health data? And how can we protect patients, especially giving the link between patient data and government records?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. We did a lot of work trying to look at this and make sure that patient privacy is always protected. And we know that mental health data is sensitive data, as well as other types of data as well. So we've actually separated out types of data, identifying sensitive data versus non-sensitive data. And the consent settings for each is different, and the access settings for each is different. So you can consent to, for example, as a patient, you can consent to sharing your non-sensitive data, but yet you can decide, I don't want to share my sensitive data, of which mental health is included. So in the consent settings, which is under the control of the patient, we've separated out the types of data, giving each one its own consent setting and access, so that less people have access to the sensitive data versus the non-sensitive data. It's a long discussion, but for the sake of that, I hope that answers the question.
Another question quickly, maybe. I know QPHI, we're not collecting samples from children, so maybe Dr. Khaled and Paivia could answer is, how do you protect vulnerable population, including children and elderly, those with limited health literacy, while still ensuring that they benefit from these advances in data usage? So
So we have approached this issue so that we have legislation, is it then primary use or secondary use, that we have then provided the system so that we can make sure that the privacy is then respected. Primary use is that in that case, then only those who are treating you, are part of the team who is treating you in different organizations, they are allowed to see your data. And of course, people can, I have my access to my patient records from my mobile phone. Which wasn't in the beginning thing that physicians were really thinking that this is great, but it has also changed the way how physicians work after the AMRs and patient records have been transparent. But then on the when we are touching then the secondary use of the data, then we don't need consent anymore, because there is this authority and there is legislation which makes sure that how we can then utilize that data in the secure way. And I think that this is a good approach, because then we don't have to ask every time that we have some kind of project then consent from people. So I think that this is a good way, and then Europe is now following this way of thinking.
Dr. Khaled, you want to add?
So the only thing I would add to that, is that some people sometimes assume that the research landscape is kind of the Wild West. I think it's very important to realize research is incredibly highly regulated, and then we have a very, very sophisticated set of ethical and legal frameworks in the state of Qatar that we have to follow whenever we do research. That includes getting informed consent from everyone in the family, including children above 7. You get the assent from them. And then once they reach the age of majority, you have to reconsent them to keep their data to keep their data for research use. Again, because we're dealing with sick patients, so we don't do any kind of background studies. It's really just focused on the disease. We also consent them if we're going to share their data or their samples with collaborators, so that's all there. The parents also sign off on it, etc. But at the end of the day, we really go out of our way to make sure that the patient privacy, patient confidentiality, and everything else related to that is held intact throughout the process.
Yeah. And we have also then on behalf, if you are then doing then and helping someone else, like on behalf then discussing with your the health system, then there is a different kind of process for that, applying that, but and also over under the 12 years of children, then there is a possibility for parents to have access to the data.
I just would add that I think the reciprocal question is also sort of important. What are we losing by not having access to this data and these samples, right?
Really important.
We basically have no pediatric cases come through because the bar to reach this, and I think it's a very important bar to protect kids and their data, but we don't get their samples, which means we don't run precision medicine trials in juvenile tumors.
Thank you. I'd like to go to the last topic that I want to address today, which is the role of industry engagement. I mean, industry plays a critical role. Much of the innovation in diagnostic and drug development is driven by industry players who increasingly rely on access to comprehensive data sets. As we explore the role of industry in utilizing health data to advance diagnostic and drug development, it's valuable in this last few minutes to explore and consider existing models of collaborations that balance innovation with privacy and equitable access. Globally, we've seen successful framework like Europe's Innovative Medicine Initiative, which brings industry and academic collaboration. We've seen the UK Biobank partners with industry to fuel research and drug discovery while maintaining stringent privacy standards. Could you, Päivi, tell us about the Finland experience? Because Finland is one of the first country to open its data to the pharma. I think there is about 13 different pharmaceutical companies that are sort of going to FinData. In this part of the world, when we talk about pharma getting access to our data, people are scared. So maybe just tell us about the model you're using and how you're able to engage with the pharmaceutical industry while still protecting the privacy and having public trust.
Yeah, of course, the public trust was then the first case when we were able to even think about this kind of project, but it needed then collaboration between the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health and Ministry of Education and Culture and Ministry of Economical Affairs and Employment, under which is also industrial policy. So to have all these three ministries to work together to find out then the way how we can then provide harmoniously then, for example, financing for these collaboration projects. But the FinGen project is the one we began 7 years ago, and we collected then 10% of our population samples and data and genotyped that, and then the genotype data is now in Finland back, and we are then combining that information to our biobank information and also for our patient record information and other information also, because we have that legislation, secondary use of the data legislation. But when the samples were then collected and genotyped, so then there were a key so that the researchers who handle the data, they don't have access to the identification number or identity of those patients. But we left then the possibility to go back also, but then you have to follow then the different procedures. So there were people gave their consent to be recalled if something is being found there, and we have really great studies also and showcases. We have that efficiency and effectiveness studies also on recalling patients where we have found, for example, risks for breast cancer, some types of breast cancer, and did tighter screening to them and have been able to avoid then breast cancers and having been able to treat them earlier also. So these are some examples. But we then asked pharma companies that would they be willing to participate this kind of project. There were no kind of hypotheses about that how we are going to use the data, but there were the awareness that we have all these rich data registers there, we have legislation there, so there will be possibility together with researchers, private sector and public sector to find out what we can do with the data. And we have got now 150 million euros financing then from private sector. And I have to point out that the privacy is there, but we have been able to use also that for the benefit of individual patients.
So it's very interesting because when I talk to the people at FinData and FinGene, it turns out that most companies are actually, first of all, in the system, you cannot access the individual data. And most companies are not interested in that. And the approach is that most companies actually come with questions that, rather than interrogate the data themselves, and then the team at FinGene and FinData, prepare the responses on this question. Dr. Saeed, at this stage in the development of QPHI, there are clearly two priorities. One is at accelerating clinical implementation, and the second one is to start thinking about, developing an innovation ecosystem around our precision health data. So could you tell us a little bit in terms of the experience you have now in interacting with companies? What are they looking for, and what will be the approach moving forward?
As you've just said, the culture of interacting with the industry is not here yet, and this is very high on our agenda, as you know, and people sometimes get alarmed when we talk about that. But this is a pathway that we have to go through. We've done it with research. We've made the data available to the research community. They've produced all these fantastic papers. They'll continue to do so. On the implementation side, the pilots are doing very well. I think we will be able to nail that one and translate all these findings into clinical implementation, affecting patients' lives. But on the industry engagement level, we still have to actually develop the right framework through which we interact with the different interests from the biotech and the pharma companies. The interest is there. We've always been contacted by all sorts of companies, small, medium, and the big pharma. They want to have a look at the data. Some of them would like to even fund some omics work. Others might be. These were high-level interactions, co-develop something or have a presence in Qatar. But as you know, Dr. Hilal and Khalid and other stakeholders here, we are now preparing the right legal framework that will enable us to go through that path.
And we don't sell data, we sell access to data.
Yeah.
And maybe Dr. Juliette. And
I just want to say, from the government perspective, that framework is highly will be highly helpful, because we have the same thing. We have people from the industry, private sector coming to us wanting to do proof of concepts, tests here, co-develop, and without that framework, we usually just say, sorry, we can't. We're not covered by any framework. So that would be very welcome.
That's a QF effort, but we're really interested in talking to our MOPH colleagues to make it a national one.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add to that was that the innovation economy is much needed here, and the private sector can just move much faster than academia and hospitals do, particularly in rare diseases. We heard from Dr. Devin that the rare diseases we have, the mutations we have, are very different than what's anywhere else in the world. So if we don't do it here, localized to our context, no one else will do it. And so what we're doing at CIDR is we're launching an innovation lab particularly for this. And that is really going to be this kind of sandbox environment where, A, you can have companies with algorithms that want to access our data. You can come in, you can use that, and you can do your own thing, and we'll let you be. But B is, if you want to develop medicines or therapies for rare diseases that we have, we'll give you access to lab space, we'll give you access to a firewalled ecosystem with access to patients, to very experienced physicians, et cetera, and access to really advanced research platforms. And that way we can co-create and we can really build towards that innovation economy. And I really think that these will be individual efforts across the healthcare system, which will facilitate the creation of the framework. So I don't think we should wait until this framework gets developed. I think we should push, and together we can develop the framework for the country.
So, Dr. Benjamin, Dr. Vivian, I don't know if you have any final remarks in terms of collaboration with industry.
Yeah, I mean, we do collaborate and with both academics as well as accessing data from different government entities. And I think the key from a company perspective is being able to access it to understand sort of population-wide elements. Individual elements are not relevant for drug development. It's really trying to understand, are there particular populations or things that enable us to make a more targeted precision medicine? And I think, and as Dr. Fakro said, there's definitely each geography almost is going to become almost its own specific precision medicine hub in many ways. So I think it's completely reshaping the way we think about drug development.
Thank you. Final comments?
I mean, I think that I'm echoing, but the collaboration and thinking about that as broadly as possible, starting with patients and moving all the way through to industry, including, government stakeholders, and sort of the whole group has to be in from the start to some degree, not to be against your push, but like you need to have things in place to protect patients, but also to get this done as fast as we can, because the sooner you get new therapies out into the world, the better your patients do.
Thank you very much. I think we're coming, the time went very fast. This is a topic that would probably require hours and days to cover. Two topics that we have not covered today is, we talk about big data as the cost. One aspect we have not talked about big data. Once you have this data, you put it all together, making sense of this data and having the resources, the AI capabilities, the infrastructure, and maintaining that is going to be crucial and an important topic, perhaps for the future to discuss. I think the concept of integrating medical and health data is going to be, in my opinion, sort of the thing that will revolutionize medicine, because we know that your zip code is a good predictor, if not better, of your health than some of the molecular markers that we have. So there's quite a lot to talk about. Thank you all for being here, and please join me in thanking the panelists for their insight and valuable contributions.